They say family dinners are where bonds are built, but ours always tasted like bitterness. The table was set perfectly, like it always was. Polished oak, spotless silverware, and crystal glasses filled with water no one really drank. Estelle, my mother, sat at the head of the table, spine straight, smile fixed. She wore elegance like armor, but her words always cut deeper than any knife. My siblings gathered like satellites orbiting her approval. I took my seat, the one at the far end. Not quite an outcast, but never central. I kept my shoulders square, my hands folded neatly. It was all muscle memory at this point. The silence before the storm, the clinking of plates and cautious small talk. My mother asked about jobs, houses, kids, never about dreams. I answered when I had to, but mostly I watched. Their glances, their smirks, the way they all danced around her, desperate to please. Then came the moment I should have expected. I don't know how you'd survive without me, darling. You've never made a single smart decision. It was said with a chuckle, like she was remembering something charming. But she looked straight at me. Laughter bubbled around the table, light, casual, deadly. I managed to smile, taught my jaw not to clench. My heart beat once, hard. Inside, though, something twisted. There it was again, that cruel brand of love. I'd heard it since I was a teenager. Every mistake wasn't a lesson. It was ammunition. She didn't guide me. She measured my failures against my brother's successes and called it care. She doesn't help me, I thought. She holds the leash. And in that moment, I knew. This was the last dinner where I'd sit and nod like I deserved it. Mom's right, my brother chimed in. We just want to see you do something with your life. He smiled like he was doing me a favor, like his mortgage and his LinkedIn profile made him my moral compass. I swallowed the bitter laugh that wanted out. I've been working, I said carefully. Freelance tech work, contract-based. You mean like one of those remote dream jobs? My sister interrupted, grinning. Where you work in your pajamas and pretend to be busy? They all laughed again. I didn't. I wasn't angry, not visibly. I was used to this. They called it teasing, concern, encouragement. But it was always about keeping me in place. It was always a game where I played the loser. Dinner ended like it always did. Smiles, hugs, and an offer to take leftovers I didn't want. Later, I sat in my car, engine off, house glowing behind me like a stage set. Their voices still echoed in my mind, even though the windows were shut. Never made a smart decision. Do something with your life. The words repeated, each time sharper, like little razors. I thought about that one night, years ago. I was 12. She'd looked at me with a frown and said, "You'll never be like your brother. He just gets it." I didn't cry then, but I remembered it. It etched something into me. Now, it made me angry. This isn't family, I thought. It's a performance where I'm the punchline. I took out my phone, not to call anyone, just to start something, anything. I typed on how to launch a tech startup without funding. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I was done doing nothing. I wasn't trying to prove them wrong. I was trying to remember who I was before I let them define me. It was past midnight when I pulled into the parking lot of an old 24-hour diner. I needed coffee, I needed quiet, and I needed to move. I slid into a booth by the window, laptop open, fingers already moving. The idea had been there for months. Quiet, patient, waiting. A platform that connects freelance caregivers to elderly clients. Personalized, local, safe. A way to help people like my aunt had needed help before she passed. A way to matter. I bought a black coffee and registered the domain name before the cup even cooled. If I build something meaningful for others, I whispered, maybe I won't need their validation. I made the first to-do list, and then I said it, softly, to no one but myself. Watch me. The sunlight crept through the blinds, striking the floor in quiet lines that reached my bed. I stared at the ceiling for a while before sitting up. My back ached, not from age but from the weight of yesterday. The air in my tiny apartment felt stale. No scented candles here, no polished furniture, just me, a stained coffee mug, and a wall covered in curling sticky notes that spelled out the word Empire in sloppy capital letters. I shuffled to the desk in the corner and opened my laptop. My checking account balance blinked back at me, $328.76. I'd seen worse, but not by much. I thought about the night I moved out. I'd packed quietly, like a tenant sneaking out after midnight. Not one of them called the next day. They didn't ask where I'd gone. Didn't care to. That silence still rang louder than any insult. I had no plan B. There was only this, what I was trying to build. I picked up the phone and started calling local senior service agencies. My voice was steady, my pitch tight. I introduced the idea like it already existed, like I wasn't just a guy sitting in a shoebox apartment with nothing but belief and a battered laptop. But belief doesn't pay the rent. One agency manager let me finish my whole pitch before she said, "Sweetheart, we've been around for 20 years. We don't roll the dice on maybes." I didn't argue. I just thanked her and hung up. An hour later, Sam called. We hadn't spoken since he helped me move a mattress, back when I thought he still had my back. "You're doing what now?" he asked, his voice already amused. I explained slowly that I was building a tech platform to connect caregivers with seniors, cutting out the fluff, giving people something real. He laughed. "You? Man, come on. You couldn't even manage a cash register at that gas station." "You really think anyone's going to trust you with their parents?" The call ended with a chuckle and a, "Good luck, though." I stared at the wall for a while. That silence again. It crawled into my bones. Part of me wanted to shut it all down, open that job board, submit a resume, do the sensible thing, but I didn't. I closed the laptop instead, leaned back, took a breath, and whispered to the empty room, "Not today." I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, but something came. It was later that evening. I was scrolling through messages when I saw her name, Angela Thomas. I hadn't thought about her in years. I helped her set up a website for her in-home care services back when I was freelancing anything I could get. "Hey," her message began. "Heard what you're trying to do. I love it. Seniors don't need more apps. They need people who care." She'd seen my name on some forum, asked around, said she still had 2 clients who might be willing to test a beta version if I had one. No promises, but real people. "I remember you took the time to show me how to update photos on my site," she added. That meant something. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Then I wrote it down in my notebook, all caps, "Find more Angelas, ignore the Sams." And just like that, the doubt began to shrink. She reminded me of what family should feel like. Support without strings, encouragement without insult. I pulled out my sketchpad and went to work. Wireframes, flowcharts, branding colors that didn't feel like an afterthought. I mapped out the user experience, each click designed to make things easier for someone who didn't grow up with an iPhone in hand. "No one believes in you until you make them regret it," I muttered as I worked. I replayed Angela's voicemail over and over. She said I had a good heart. That mattered more than I wanted to admit. I stuck a new note on the wall. Prove them wrong with progress. Then it happened. A ping. My first beta sign-up. Angela had come through. Someone out there believed enough to try. I didn't jump up or yell. I just sat back and let myself feel the smallest kind of win. "It begins," I whispered. But the universe has a way of evening things out. Just as I was about to shut down for the night, a message popped up from my older brother. "Heard you're playing Tech Wizard now. Don't embarrass the family." No greeting, no punctuation, just that. I stared at it, hands frozen over the keyboard. The nerve of it, like my success would somehow tarnish their image of perfection. They don't want me to win, I thought. They want me to disappear quietly. I started typing a reply, sharp, angry, truthful, but I deleted it. Instead, I posted something else. No names, no tags, just a quote. "You can't shame someone who's proud of their scars." Then I printed the logo I'd just designed, black and bold, my company's name underneath it. I taped it to the wall, right over an old photo of all of us, taken during one of those perfect holiday dinners. 5 days had passed since that small victory at the community hall, yet my apartment felt heavier than ever. The sticky notes on my wall curled at the edges from the heat, their words blurring together like a warning I couldn't quite read. Late afternoon sunlight spilled across the floor when my phone buzzed. I saw her name before I heard her voice. "Hi, sweetheart." My mother's tone was bright, practiced. "Just wanted to check in. Hope your little app isn't too hard for your tiny brain." Click. That was it. That velvet tone, the one everyone else thought was caring, landed like a slap disguised as a pat on the back. I didn't replay it, I deleted it, but the words burned into me like they always did. I stood there, hands still on the phone, heart steady but heavier. I opened my journal and wrote, "How many times have I swallowed poison because it came in a velvet voice?" My handwriting was sharp, not shaky. For the first time, the question wasn't rhetorical. It was an answer to itself. Memories started rising like floodwater. One of them was always the same. I was 12, standing in a stiff dress at my piano recital. She clapped louder than anyone, smiled like a proud queen, but in the car afterwards, she gripped the steering wheel tight and hissed, "Your posture was terrible. You looked like some street performer." I remember staring at my knees, fingers still trembling from the keys. Another time, 14, her voice cold but smug. "You're only special because I made you that way." Those words had built a cage around me without me noticing. Each time she lifted me up, she yanked me back down twice as hard. I had been defending her even in my own head, inventing kindness where there wasn't any. Standing there now, staring at my cramped apartment walls, I realized it was a system, not a series of mistakes. "I don't have to defend her anymore," I whispered. My voice cracked, but it was the sound of a door opening. The next morning, I caught myself mid-sentence on a business call. "I'm sorry, I'm not sure if this idea is..." I stopped. I wasn't sorry. I was about to apologize for existing, for having an idea, for being visible. I closed my eyes for a second, then finished my thought firmly. "This idea is solid, and here's why." My voice held. The silence on the other end shifted from skeptical to attentive. When the call ended, I grabbed a sticky note, wrote in black marker, "I'm not sorry for taking space," and slapped it above my desk. It looked small and defiant among the charts and mock-ups. Every time I've said sorry, I thought, what I meant was please don't punish me for being visible. That afternoon, my emails were shorter, my tone steadier, no edge, no apology, just me, taking up my own air. Then came an email that almost slipped through, an invitation to speak at a local senior care event, nothing flashy, just a small conference room and a handful of chairs. My first instinct was to decline, to tell myself I wasn't ready, but my finger hovered over the keyboard. Angela's words from weeks ago echoed back. "You've got a good heart. Don't let them make you forget that." I clicked accept before I could back out. The room smelled of coffee and old carpet. My hands shook as I spoke, but I didn't read from notes. I told them why I cared, about my aunt, about the dignity seniors deserved. I saw older women nodding, some leaning forward. When I finished, one of them smiled and said quietly, "You reminded me of myself when I was brave." The applause wasn't loud, but it was real. Driving home, I felt something new, not emptiness, but fullness, like breathing air after years underwater. Validation didn't have to come from blood ties. Strangers could see you too. Later that night, looking for a charger, I opened a drawer and found an old silver chain. She'd given it to me on my 18th birthday, said it was to remind you who raised you. The metal was cool against my palm. I almost threw it out. Instead, I put it in a small box and wrote, "For the documentary," on the lid. Not nostalgia, evidence. My phone buzzed. Angela again. "You okay? You've been quiet since your talk." I stared at the screen before typing back. "I think I'm finally learning that silence was never peace, it was just survival." I set the phone down, closed the drawer. A single tear slid down my cheek, but it wasn't sadness, it was release. I turned to the mirror and met my own eyes. My voice was steady when I said it, the words tasting like truth for the first time. I don't owe anyone quiet anymore. I opened the family archive site and something screamed, "You're not in here." The screen blinked, cold and sterile. I sat there in that rented co-working space, coffee half cold, the sun slanting through dusty blinds, trying to convince myself I had just misread something. The interface looked the same as always, but now I saw a new folder buried 3 layers deep. Founder's Legacy. Password protected. No way in unless you knew it existed. I hovered over the preview. Blackwood Estate, original will. Then I saw the list of heirs. My name wasn't there. At first I couldn't move, like my body hadn't gotten the signal yet that something had fractured. It wasn't just omission, it was erasure. That archive wasn't built to honor legacy. It was designed to bury mine. I stared at the screen, fists tightening on my lap. It had never been about love. It was always about leverage. The next morning I texted Cordelia. No emojis, just need to meet. No questions. We picked a quiet cafe off Thomas Road. She arrived looking like she'd aged 10 years in 2 days. No makeup, just a worn shawl and restless fingers. She didn't say hello, just sat, took out a manila envelope, slid it across the table. "I never destroyed it," she said quietly. I opened it. The paper was thin, like it might crumble from the weight of truth. My name, in black ink, circled in shaky pen. Primary heir, dated years ago. I looked up at her, waiting. Rowena said if I didn't get rid of it, the family would cut me off. No trust fund, no protection. Her eyes welled up. She said you were never supposed to see this. Every breath I took felt like it was scraping glass. So you chose her. I was scared. I thought you'd be fine. You always are. She reached out, hesitated. You deserve to know. But promise me you'll be careful. I nodded. But something in me had already stopped promising people anything. That night, while I was sorting through old documents, I got an email. No subject line, just a forward. It was from a junior tech writer I barely knew. Thought you should see this before it spreads. Inside was an internal memo from my mother, dated 6 weeks ago. She remains a liability to the family brand, emotionally unstable, unfit for strategic leadership. The leak had already hit a small blog, some niche newsletter that covered family-run empires. But the comment section was brutal. She's a mess. No wonder the family hid her. Some people just weren't built to carry legacy. I sat still reading each word, each jab. They didn't sting the way I expected. Shame, yes, but beneath it, rage. Cold, clean rage. I opened a draft, a statement, my voice, my truth. But I stopped before hitting post. They were expecting noise, a breakdown, a public spectacle. No, I'd give them silence and consequence. The next morning, I went back to that little workspace, eyes raw but hands steady. I laid everything out on the table like a puzzle, one piece at a time, the original will, the email leak, Cordelia's confession scribbled in her own handwriting. I whispered to myself, proof is the only freedom when truth is weaponized. For the first time, I opened a blank document not to write my story, but to build my case. Statutes, signatures, timestamps. Then I drafted quiet messages to people I trusted in law and media. Just outlines, just signals. All morning, I sat like that. No music, no distractions. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the slow click of keys. By the time noon rolled around, I had folders labeled. One for estate, one for media, one for strategy. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. But my heart had a thrum in it, like a countdown. The next day, I sat across from a radio host who smiled too much and asked too little. It was a soft interview, until it wasn't. So, he said, adjusting his mic, do you think your family's been holding you back? I smiled, calm, neutral, but I looked him dead in the eye. I owe them nothing except truth. He didn't press further. We went to commercial. In the parking lot, I sat in my car, the seat still warm from the sun. I let out one breath, and with it, one tear. Not weakness. Release. They had stolen my name, but they hadn't stolen my will, and I was done letting silence stand in for peace. I sat alone in my workspace, the hum of my computer the only companion. The night outside had softened into a muted shade of blue, and in that dim light I ran through my statement again. My voice was quiet, unwavering. You don't have to like me, but you will respect me. I repeated it, letting every word settle in the air. Behind me, the deck slides lay ready. Dates, signatures, receipts, correspondences. My breath was calm. Anger doesn't have to be loud, I murmured to myself. Sometimes it just has to be clear. Over and over. I printed each slide, stacking them carefully. I looked at the stack and thought, I'm not here to ask permission. Boardroom day arrived and I felt the weight of history in every polished surface. My siblings were there, smiling too precisely, bracing. My mother sat in her regal posture, expectant of defiance. I walked straight to the table, placed my folder down, and opened it. First page, the original will naming me heir. Next, the leaked memo labeling me a liability. Then, Angela's testimony, scribbled but unwavering. The room held its breath. I cleared my throat. "Erase me from the legacy," I said, "and I'll rebuild it under my own name." My brother scoffed, as though I'd offended him with a rumor. But the evidence silenced him. My mother leaned forward, lips tight. "You'll never have what it takes to lead." I met her gaze. My tone was level. "You taught me what not to become. That's leadership enough." A pause. Then I slid another folder toward them. Legal statements, affidavits, everything in place. "You have 7 days to acknowledge my rights. If not, I go public." My heart raced. Eyes flicked. Some siblings paled. The board's attorney swallowed. My mother's response, "You're bluffing." I leaned back. "Try me." I walked out of that room with my head held, adrenaline humming in my veins. My legs felt like stone, but steady. Minutes later, I found Angela in a cafe. She looked at me with awe and relief. "You didn't just speak," she said softly. "You shifted the ground under them." We clinked coffee mugs, no champagne, just the quiet warmth of solidarity. "Here's to chosen family," I said. Back home, I uploaded a quote to social media. "If you won't open the door, I'll build a new house." Comments poured in, strangers who had needed the message, friends who felt seen. I read them, let them stay. That night, I found the old piano recital photo tucked in a drawer. Me at 12, stiff, uncertain. I placed it beside the logo I've been designing for this new path. The contrast was sharp. The nervous child versus the woman standing at the threshold. "That girl didn't disappear," I whispered. "She evolved." Then I opened my laptop and typed to a journalist I admired. "Let's talk about building legacies." I sent it. I sat in the corporate lounge, tapping refresh over and over until the notice flashed. Access suspended. My email, my internal drives, the files I'd built. It was all locked out. Panic might have hit someone else. I didn't let it. I dialed the IT manager. He spoke softly into the receiver. Top-down orders. Someone above me sent it. And there it was, the family's retaliation, crisp and surgical. They weren't afraid of me shouting. They were afraid of me speaking. I grabbed my phone and took screenshots. Every folder I could still see, every header, every timestamp, documentation before erasure. They were gearing up for a full-blown public takedown. Seconds stretched. Then my alert lit up again. A headline, "Heiress misuses family funds, bullies staff." The story was dressed in scandal with quotes from an anonymous source and a snippet of a voicemail, one I never recorded. I felt a hollow ache, but I stayed still. I forwarded the article to my lawyer, then I opened a blank file and began writing, every word precise. My eyes burned. "Let them play dirty. I've kept the receipts clean," I said under my breath. The next morning, I walked into a podcast studio. I had agreed to this weeks ago. Now it was my stage. The host welcomed me, and we started rolling. I spoke about legacy, manipulation, what it means to carry a name, but never named mine. When it ended, I leaned forward and said, "If you ever wonder why some daughters walk away from wealth, ask how often they were told they didn't deserve it." The studio went quiet. Messages flooded in the moment I stepped outside. Women, men, strangers. I saw lines like, "You gave me words I couldn't say to my own mother." So many voices echoed back at me. Not revenge, resonance. Later that evening, Angela slipped into my apartment carefully, closing the door behind her. She handed me a folder thick with documents. "They've been watching you for years," she said, voice small. Inside were emails between my mother and private investigators. Logs of calls, tracking code, financial monitoring. My breath caught as I flipped through pages, but I kept my tone even. They wanted war. Now I'm bringing law. We sat, silent, letting the weight of it settle. Then I began transferring files to a secure drive, laying the foundation for the legal assault we'd been planning in the shadows. After Angela left, the apartment felt too quiet. I found the old piano recital photo, the one from years ago, and tore it in half. The side with her arm went into the trash. The other half I framed and placed on the shelf in front of me. I made tea, sat by the window, and drafted a single text to her. "You've crossed the last line." I pressed send, then rested my hands steady on the glass. Tomorrow everything changes. I arrived at the courthouse late in the afternoon with a manila envelope pressed against my chest. The building loomed cold and impassive. I tread through marble halls where flyers whispered of other battles, past closed doors and silent watchers. At the counter I slipped the papers: counterclaim under an alias, injunction request, surveillance records, across the desk without a glance. The clerk stamped them and handed them back. "This is not revenge, it's reclamation." I slipped outside and saw cameras snapping, scribes shouting questions. I walked past them, lips tight. Let them see the lawsuit before they hear my voice. I climbed into my car, adrenaline humming. By evening, the exposé dropped. A major news site ran a blistering piece titled "Legacy Unraveled." It exposed the hidden memos, the frozen access, the secret alliances my mother had built to keep me invisible. Executives were named, documents published, social media erupted. The family, cornered behind glossy facades, scrambled. A board meeting was called within hours, whispers behind locked doors. From my living room, I read it all, heart pinging with vindication, yet cautious, knowing the escalation had just begun. When I entered the boardroom hours later, lawyers and press flanked me. The room fell silent. Eyes shifted. I stood tall. "You plotted behind my back. Now you answer publicly," I said, voice steady. My mother opened her mouth, but I stopped her. "I will speak my truth." A sibling attempted to block my access. I slammed the court order on the table. The weight of paper shifted the balance. The air cracked. I watched. Some board members who had stood with her began to lean. A sibling I'd barely known looked at me and nodded, as though waking up. Alliances frayed. Fear crept into her expression. Control cracked. After the meeting, I unlocked my car, hands trembling. I opened the half-framed piano recital photo from years ago. In the empty space where applause should have been, I saw what I'd become. "They didn't imagine I'd fight with a pen instead of a scream," I murmured. I started the engine and drove into dusk, the city lights flickering ahead. The reckoning had begun, not to return, but to remake. I spent the early evening organizing files, legal documents, screenshots, personal letters I'd saved in secret folders. My apartment was quiet, each paper laid out like markers on a battlefield. There was no fear now, just resolve. I returned to an old journal from my teenage years, flipping to a page where I wrote, "I feel invisible, even to myself." The words hit me differently now. I realize this fight isn't just about justice, it's about being seen. For too long, silence erased me. Now my truth would be the revolution. I set up a microphone and began recording the first episode of my personal podcast, raw, unedited, real. A day later, I got a message from a former mentor from college. She was a respected businesswoman now, someone I once admired. She'd read the exposé and requested a meeting. That evening, we met on the rooftop of a downtown cafe, warm wind stirring the lights around us. She told me her own story. She'd been betrayed by her family, erased from their memory, forced to start over. Then she leaned forward. "I want to fund you," she said, voice steady. "Start your rival company. Do it on your terms." I blinked. The twist. She used to be a direct rival of my mother's in business. She had arms in the same deals, knew the same circles. The offer staggered me but intrigued me. "They told you to stay small," she said. "Let's show them what scale looks like." That same night, my phone erupted. Social media exploded. Praise, skepticism, vitriol. I read messages that called me courage, icons that questioned my motives. Among them, veiled threats slipped through. I scheduled a private security team for my apartment. Later, I found my front door ajar. My heart jolted. It was just the wind, but it reminded me that truth doesn't protect you, it provokes you. The realization stung. Telling the truth doesn't just free you, it isolates you. Then out of nowhere, my lawyer called with the next blow. My mother was moving to legally disown me from the family trust. Not just inheritance, even the small childhood assets I thought safe were being liquidated. I closed my eyes at the news. Shock wasn't the hard part. The cold, calculated cruelty was. I rooted around a drawer and found an old birthday card she'd written. "You'll always be my girl." I pressed it into the flame. The edges curled and blackened, then vanished. My resolve tightened. They do not get to write me out of this story. I opened my laptop and began sketching the mission for my new company. Legacy, yes, but on my terms. Later that night, I uploaded the podcast under a pseudonym. It spoke of generational betrayal, of love traded as currency, of choosing your own family when blood fails you. Within hours, it trended across forums for older women. Comments poured in. One message read, "You said everything I've never had the words for." I closed my eyes and smiled, not in victory, but because I had found connection. The air was cool that morning, even for Phoenix. I pulled into the lot of the Women's Support Center just after sunrise. No cameras, no court orders, just a plastic container of donuts and a bag of notebooks under my arm. The building hummed with quiet chatter. Inside, older women circled folding tables, some laughing, some crying. One leaned toward me and squeezed my hand with worn fingers. "Your voice," she said, "got me out. 37 years, and I finally walked away. You saved me." I nodded, didn't know what else to say. I sat in the back with a few others, handing out pens, tissues, listening. There was something heavier than grief here, something quieter, maybe peace. I'd always chased justice like a courtroom scene, but this was justice too. Not a show, just staying, just building something from scratch. That thought stayed with me all afternoon as I prepared for the press event. I didn't want glitz, I wanted clarity. So we rented a plain hall, no logos, no lights, just a mic. I stood alone in front of a small audience. "I used to think everything I was worth came with my last name," I said, "but I don't believe that anymore." I announced a new scholarship fund, one aimed at young women thrown out by their families. My own profits, no donors. I could see the reporters scribbling. But I wasn't finished. I held up a document. "And this is my new name, effective today, no longer theirs." I said it out loud for the first time slowly, letting it settle. There was silence at first, then flashes exploded. I could feel the story spreading even before the tweets began. That night, long after the event ended, I checked my phone out of habit. One new voicemail. My mother. Her voice came through soft, too calm. "You did what I never had the courage to do." She didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't offer any. "I'm stepping away from everything," she added. No press. Just gone. The line clicked off. I listened once, then deleted it. Closure wasn't about hearing the right words, it was choosing not to need them anymore. The weeks that followed moved slower. I led a writing workshop on self-worth, laughed with women who'd become something like sisters, signed a modest but meaningful contract that gave my company breathing room. I passed a bookstore downtown one evening. My memoir, once a podcast, sat in the window, tucked between cookbooks and true crime. I walked on, smiling. I didn't go back to the old house until I knew I wouldn't need anything from it. No apology, no acknowledgement. I just parked outside, looked at the porch where I used to sit waiting to be noticed. I left a photo of myself, me, smiling, standing tall, a marker. This is who I became. The next morning I sat by the window with my journal open on my lap. Birds stirred on the wires, and the sky had just begun to bleed light. I wrote without edits. Not about revenge or pain, but about the truth I'd claimed. And at the bottom of the last page, I wrote, "Family isn't who you come from, it's who you walk with." I closed the book, breathed deep, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for what came next.